There comes a moment in every life when silence screams louder than words, when your breath feels heavier than your body, and when the very air you inhale seems to ache with memories of what was lost. Pain does not knock gently, it barges in, uninvited and unapologetic. It does not whisper, it howls. But what if I told you that this storm, this ache that breaks you, is not just there to destroy you, but to awaken something deeper inside you? What if every tear you've shed has been watering the seeds of your purpose? Pain is not the enemy, it is the sculptor. It chisels away our fears, our false identities, our comfort zones, and in that rawness, we meet ourselves for the first time. We discover the purpose hidden behind the wounds. So today, let's walk through the shadows, not to dwell in darkness, but to find the light that pain was hiding all along. Accept the pain, don't escape it. There's a strange silence that enters your life when pain becomes your constant companion. A silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound, but from the presence of something too heavy to speak about. We often try to fill that silence with distractions, people, noise, screens, or busy schedules, thinking, if we don't acknowledge the pain, maybe it will disappear. But pain does not vanish when ignored. It hides in the corners of your soul and waits for you to be still enough to feel it. Running away may feel like survival, but it delays healing. The more you avoid the wound, the deeper it sinks. The more you deny the ache, the louder it becomes. Because pain was never meant to be silenced. It was meant to be heard, felt, and honored. Every tear that falls is a message. Every crack in your heart is a door. You don't escape pain by pretending it isn't there. You embrace it by allowing it to sit beside you like an old friend, misunderstood yet loyal. When you stop resisting what hurts, something miraculous happens. You begin to soften. Not in a weak way, but in a deeply human way. You stop trying to control every emotion and instead you allow them to flow. You learn to breathe through the chaos. You learn to stay with yourself in the discomfort. You discover that it is not the pain that destroys you, but the refusal to feel it fully. And in that realization, you awaken a new kind of courage. This kind of courage doesn't scream. It whispers. It says, stay. Stay through the storm. Stay through the sleepless nights. Stay through the questions with no answers. Stay even when your heart feels too tired to beat. Because staying means you're choosing to grow roots. You're choosing to heal from within, not just cover up the surface wounds. And healing isn't a perfect process. It's messy, it's nonlinear. It breaks you down before it builds you up. But every breakdown is preparing you for a breakthrough. Every moment of stillness, when you choose not to run, is making you stronger in ways the world may never see. You begin to notice parts of yourself you never knew existed, the strength to endure, the capacity to love, the ability to forgive yourself for simply being human. The pain you once feared starts to become familiar, not in a painful way, but in a grounding way. It no longer controls you. You begin to see it for what it is, a guide, not a punishment. It's leading you back to yourself. It's showing you the areas you've abandoned, the dreams you've buried, the truths you've silenced. Pain becomes the torch that lights the way into your own heart. The deeper you allow yourself to feel, the more authentic your life becomes. You stop pretending to be okay when you're not. You stop wearing the mask that says, I'm fine. And in doing so, you give others permission to be real too. You create a space for connection that only vulnerability can offer. That is the beauty of acceptance. It doesn't just change you, it softens the world around you. Sometimes, healing feels like losing everything you once knew. But maybe what you're losing is only what you no longer need. Maybe pain is removing the layers that were never really you. The roles, the expectations, the illusions. And what's left behind is something raw, something honest, something beautifully whole. It's not about pretending you love the pain. It's about recognizing that the pain is part of your journey. It's about holding space for grief without letting it define you. It's about honoring the parts of you that are still learning how to breathe in a world that doesn't always make sense. And slowly, Gently, you begin to walk again. You may not walk as fast, you may limp, you may carry invisible weights, but you walk with wisdom now. You walk with presence. You walk with a story etched into your bones, a story that others will one day draw strength from, and that makes every difficult step meaningful. Acceptance is the beginning of everything. It's the soil where purpose is planted. When you stop fighting your reality and start nurturing it, you create room for something sacred to grow. Something only your pain could teach you. Something only your heart could carry. That something may not have a name yet. It may not be clear or defined, but it lives in every decision to keep going. It lives in every breath you take when breathing hurts. It lives in every moment you choose presence over escape. That is your quiet revolution. That is where your purpose begins to bloom. So let the pain come. Let it sit with you. Let it whisper what it came to teach. And when you finally hear its voice, not through fear, but through love, you'll understand that the purpose was never outside of you. It was always within, waiting to be found beneath the ache. And even if you still feel the sting of what's been lost, let that be a reminder of how deeply you have lived, how deeply you have loved, and how deeply you are meant to rise again. Transform the pain into power. There comes a time when the weight of the pain feels too unbearable, like you're carrying a mountain on your chest that no one else can see. In those moments, it feels like everything is slipping away, your hope, your confidence, your sense of direction. And yet, something stirs inside you, a quiet defiance, a whisper that says, "You are not done yet." That whisper is the beginning of power. Power isn't loud. It doesn't always come with triumph or applause. Sometimes, power is the breath you take after a night of crying. Sometimes, it's getting up when your heart is still aching. Sometimes, it's choosing to live when every part of you feels numb. True power doesn't look like perfection, it looks like perseverance in the middle of brokenness. Pain offers you a choice. Either it becomes the story that keeps you small or the fire that fuels your becoming. The choice doesn't have to be immediate, it can be messy. You can crawl, you can falter, you can question everything, but eventually you'll realize that the very things that tried to break you were also sharpening you. They were sculpting something stronger than you imagined. There is a hidden resilience that pain awakens in us. It shakes us to our core. It removes the unnecessary. It strips away the layers of who we thought we had to be. And underneath it all, there's something fierce, something steadier version of you that doesn't pretend anymore. That version doesn't need validation. That version turns wounds into wisdom and pain into purpose. You begin to take back your power by owning your story. Not the perfect parts, the raw, real, shattered parts, the moments you don't talk about, the chapters you thought were too painful to revisit. You bring them into the light, and you realize they don't control you anymore. You've survived them. And survival is not weakness, it's evidence of your strength. Transformation doesn't come from forgetting what hurt you. It comes from facing it and saying, "You may have shaped me, but you will not define me." It's when you gather the broken pieces and start building something beautiful out of them. A mosaic of lessons, scars, growth, and grace. That's not just healing, that's power. The moment you choose to rise is the moment your pain loses its grip. Not because it disappears, but because you no longer fear it. You've looked it in the eye, you've walked through its fire. You've cried its tears. And now you carry its wisdom. And that wisdom, it becomes the torch you hold for others walking in the dark. You start to realize that your deepest pain is your greatest teacher. It taught you how to be compassionate. It taught you how to see others. It made you softer in all the right ways and stronger in all the quiet ways. And now, you don't just live, you lead. Not because you're above the pain, but because you've been through it and found something meaningful on the other side. Turning pain into power doesn't mean forgetting your past. It means transforming it. Turning shame into empathy. Turning grief into fuel. Turning heartbreak into insight. It's the alchemy of the soul using your suffering to create something that matters. Something that speaks. Something that serves. Every time you choose to turn your pain into light, you create space for someone else to do the same. Your story becomes a lifeline. Your voice becomes a mirror. Your survival becomes a roadmap, and without even realizing it, you start to change lives, not because you are perfect, but because you are real. And in this process, you begin to rediscover joy. Not the kind that's loud and flashy, but the quiet kind, the kind that lives in peace after the storm. The joy of knowing you survived. The joy of knowing you are using your life to build something that matters. That joy becomes your power. Power is not the absence of pain, it is the decision to rise above it. It is the courage to feel it fully and still move forward. It is the strength to carry the wound and still choose love. That is the kind of power pain gives you. It doesn't come from comfort, it comes from your willingness to transform. You begin to speak with clarity. You act with conviction. You live with purpose. And not because life suddenly became easier, but because you became stronger. Stronger not in armor, but in authenticity. You no longer hide your story, you own it. And that ownership, that is where true transformation begins. Your pain did not come to end you. It came to introduce you to a version of yourself that was buried beneath comfort. And now that it has awakened, nothing can stop you. You have become someone who turns darkness into light, wounds into wings, and pain into power. Let your pain guide your purpose. There are moments in life that feel like the ground beneath you has cracked wide open, and you're falling into a silence that no one else understands. Moments when your heart has been stretched so far by loss, grief, or betrayal that you no longer recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. In those moments, the pain doesn't just hurt, it reshapes you. And in that reshaping lies a truth most people never tell you. Pain often points you to where your purpose truly lives. Purpose doesn't arrive dressed in certainty. It doesn't come as a glowing light with a clear direction. More often, it's hidden behind questions. It's buried beneath the very moments that made you question everything. Your purpose isn't always found in what brings you happiness. It's often found in what broke your heart. Because the things that once shattered you also taught you what truly matters. And in that knowing, purpose begins to whisper. Sometimes the very thing that hurts you the most is the very place you're meant to heal others. Maybe you lost something that meant everything. Maybe you were silenced when you needed to speak. Maybe your spirit was dimmed in rooms where you tried so hard to belong. But what if those losses weren't punishments? What if they were redirections guiding you toward a purpose that only your story could carry? Your pain knows the way. It doesn't scream directions. It gently nudges. It shows you the faces that remind you of your past. It opens your eyes to the struggles of others that you now understand on a soul-deep level. You become aware. You become awake. You stop seeing pain as the enemy and you start seeing it as a map. A sacred map written in your own tears, pointing you towards something greater than survival, towards service. And in that space, you begin to realize that everything you endured wasn't random. That heartbreak had a lesson. That loneliness carved space for self-discovery. That betrayal broke illusions and brought truth. And slowly, you gather those lessons like scattered pieces, and they start to build a picture. A picture of purpose that only you were meant to paint. Purpose isn't always about doing something big. Sometimes it's found in the quietest callings. The way you show up for someone in pain because you remember how it felt to be unseen. The way you use your voice now because once you were silenced. The way you choose kindness. Not because life was kind to you, but because you know the cost of cruelty. That is purpose in its purest form, born from what you've walked through. You don't need a stage to live with purpose. You don't need recognition or validation. You just need a heart that is willing to give meaning to the mess. A soul that chooses to respond with intention instead of resentment. That is when you know your pain has become your compass. It no longer leads you into despair. It leads you toward healing, connection, and deeper love. And it's not about forgetting what happened. It's about understanding that what happened shaped you in sacred ways. You carry the fire, not the ashes. You carry the growth, not the wound. And in doing so, you become a living example of what it means to find purpose in pain, not by avoiding it, but by walking through it and letting it light the way. When you live this way, you inspire others without even trying. Your life becomes a quiet revolution. People feel safe around your honesty. They feel seen in your softness. And without knowing it, you begin to lead not with force, but with presence. That is the power of living guided by pain turned purpose. Letting your pain guide you doesn't mean living in it forever. It means listening to what it taught you and honoring that wisdom in the way you move through the world. You begin to build a life that reflects your truth. You choose relationships that see you. You create boundaries that protect you. You chase dreams that fulfill you, not because you're trying to escape your past, but because you've learned from it. There is a stillness that comes when you live with purpose. A deep-rooted knowing that even if life isn't perfect, it is meaningful. Even if the past hurt, the present matters. Even if the scars remain, they are part of your design. You stop chasing what you thought you needed, and you start embracing what your soul was always searching for: authenticity, connection, and impact. And you realize slowly that your pain was never meant to define you. It was meant to refine you, to reveal the diamond buried beneath the dust, to wake up the parts of you that were never meant to stay asleep. And in that awakening, you find that life is not just happening to you, it's happening through you. You begin to feel a deeper sense of gratitude, not for the pain itself, but for what it unearthed, for the resilience it built, for the empathy it carved, for the purpose it revealed. And that gratitude becomes your quiet fuel, the reason you rise every morning, even when the weight is still there. And when the darkness tries to creep back in, you don't run from it anymore. You meet it like an old teacher. You say, I remember you, but I've changed now. And that change, that evolution, that is your purpose revealing itself layer by layer, moment by moment, heartbeat by heartbeat, in the end. And so, as we stand here carrying the weight of stories that were never meant to be fairy tales, holding hearts that have been cracked open more times than we can count, and remembering nights when hope seemed like a distant star, we are reminded of something powerful. Pain is not the end of the story. It is the page that turns us towards something far greater. Pain may enter uninvited, but it brings gifts we never asked for, gifts wrapped in sorrow, but laced with wisdom. It teaches us to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. It teaches us to breathe, even when every breath trembles with ache. It teaches us to feel, not because feeling is easy, but because numbness is too high a price to pay for false peace. And in the stillness of acceptance, we begin to hear something we never knew. We needed our own voice rising through the silence, steady and strong. Then comes the moment when we no longer see ourselves as victims of what happened, but as alchemists turning pain into power, wounds into wisdom, and losses into lessons. We stop asking for a lighter load and start building a stronger soul. We carry our story like a lantern, not to showcase our scars, but to light the way for someone who still believes they're walking alone. That's not just healing, that's becoming. And in that becoming, we no longer chase purpose, we realize we were walking beside it all along. The purpose wasn't hidden in perfection. It wasn't waiting at some distant summit. It was growing quietly in the cracks of our broken moments. It was breathing inside our silent prayers. It was living in the strength we didn't know we had, rising every time we fell. That purpose was never separate from our pain. It was shaped by it. So if you are still carrying the heaviness of unanswered questions, if you are still trying to make sense of why it had to hurt so much, if your heart still trembles at the thought of what you've lost, know this: you are not lost. You are being led. The path may not look like everyone else's, and it shouldn't, because your pain has given you a vision no one else carries, a tenderness no one else understands, a depth that was carved by the very things that tried to bury you. But you are not buried. You are planted. And even in your darkest soil, something beautiful is trying to grow. Your roots are deeper now. Your branches stronger. Your heart more open. And in time, Your life becomes a living testament, not of what was broken, but of what was built through the breaking. You become someone whose light was born in the dark. Purpose doesn't ask you to forget the pain. It asks you to carry it with intention, to use it, to speak through it, to love more fiercely because of it, to serve more deeply in its name. And when you live like that, your pain doesn't become your prison, it becomes your platform. Your past doesn't become your weight, it becomes your wings. And perhaps that is the miracle within the mess, that in the very space where we thought life ended, something else quietly began. A new breath, a new voice, a new purpose, written not despite the pain, but because of it. And when you walk forward from that place, you don't just survive, you awaken. You become the proof that beauty can bloom even from the ashes, that a heart can still beat after being broken, that meaning can rise from misery, that love can grow where loss once lived. And that somehow, in the deepest ache of your soul, you didn't just find purpose, you found yourself.